We're here in the collection storage area of the National Portrait Gallery with Dr. Frank Goodyear, Associate Curator of Photography. Can you tell us who we have in this portrait beside us?
This ambrotype portrait was taken of George Armstrong Custer when he was a student at West Point. He wears his cadet uniform and brandishes a small pistol in a rather mischievous manner for the photographer.
Now, you've told us that Custer was not exactly the greatest scholar on earth, but he was certainly someone you couldn't fail to spot when he was on the battlefield. Can you tell us a little bit about Custer and his personality?
In the spring of 1861, Lincoln needed lieutenants for the Union Army, and the decision was made to graduate two distinct classes. A first group graduated in May, 45 students, promptly departed to Washington, D.C. to help in the defense of the U.S. Capitol. And then a second group graduated 6 weeks later in June. George Custer was a part of that graduating class of 34 students. What's interesting is that Custer finished last academically in that particular class. Though a popular member of the class, I think that his mischievous conduct and perhaps inattention to academics led him to finish last in his class.
And what are we seeing in this photograph? We see Custer in his uniform. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
This is a student portrait that would have been taken and probably given to a family member. Here is George Custer, a student at West Point. This is the kind of keepsake that family members would have cherished.
Now, Custer's performance in the Civil War pushed him right on up the ladder of leadership. Could you talk to us a little bit about how well he scored on the battlefield?
Custer was somebody who was not afraid to push the battle to the enemy, involved in numerous skirmishes and battles during the war itself. And though a young man, quickly rose up the Union military ranks. By age 23, he becomes a brigadier general. 1 week later, he is taking a lead role at the Battle of Gettysburg, where he repels a attacking Jeb Stuart force. With his blonde hair and his blue eyes and a interest in making headlines, Custer, at age 23, became a kind of storied figure in the North.
And of course, the Custer story does not end there. Can you tell us how our famous young general meets his untimely end?
Yeah, Custer's a young man in this particular picture, and known as the boy general during the war. But when the war ended, he wanted to continue his service in the U.S. military. And that attention was brought out west, where he became an important cavalry leader on the Great Plains in various battles against Native Americans. Though in the summer of 1876 in southern Montana, Custer's small 7th Cavalry met a much larger force under the leadership of Sitting Bull, Crazy Horse, and a group of more than 1,000 Sioux and Northern Cheyenne leaders, and that the 7th Cavalry and Custer died there at the Battle of the Little Bighorn. The news of Custer's death and the defeat of the 7th Cavalry at Little Bighorn arrived about a week later in the East. President Grant was at Philadelphia to mark the 100th birthday of the United States. And it was on that day that news arrived that Custer and his 7th Cavalry had been vanquished, and that left a very bittersweet moment on what was to be such a joyous day.